As we drift into the gentle embrace of sleep, imagine a mystical forest where shadows whisper secrets and ancient trees stand watch. In this enchanted realm lies a peculiar daisy, unlike any other, glowing softly in the twilight. She waits in a hidden glen, her silvery petals drawing in the darkness, ready to guide the lost and weary who wander through the night. Close your eyes and let the magic of the night daisy envelop you, as her light leads you softly into dreams, reminding you that even in the darkest hours, hope is never far away. Deep in the forgotten heart of an ancient forest, where the trees wore their branches like dark crowns and shadows whispered secrets from ages past, lay a single peculiar daisy. This daisy, unlike any of her kind, did not stretch her petals to the sun, nor did she bask in the warm beams that filtered down through the canopy during the day. She lingered instead in a quiet glen, cloaked in shadows and cool muted light. Her petals, an odd shade of silver grey, almost seemed to pull the darkness toward her, as if she held some quiet purpose known only to herself. This daisy was alone, for nothing grew nearby, not even the hardy moss that often blanketed the roots of old trees. It was as though the very earth knew that her life was unlike any other's, that her path was strange and shrouded in mystery. She did not sway to the music of the wind like the other flowers, nor did she close her petals with the coming of twilight. Instead, she waited. Every evening, she lifted her delicate head and turned her gaze skyward, as if searching for something that only the stars might understand. It was on one such night, with twilight folding gently into dusk, that a stirring began to ripple through the forest. A whisper rose in the air, not of any creature, but of the forest itself. The trees, ancient and wise, leaned closer, their leaves quivering as if they were holding their breath. The creatures of the night, the watchful owl, the curious fox, and the sly, whispering winds, seemed to pause, all their attention fixed on the hidden glen where the daisy waited. The whisper grew louder, spreading through the forest like a thread of light winding its way through the darkness. It spoke of a fairy, a mysterious and ancient being whose powers were the kind that even the oldest oaks could not fathom. She was known as the Fairy of Forgotten Paths, a figure of legend and half-remembered dreams who roamed the forest at twilight, searching for those with hearts pure enough to grant a rare gift. Her magic was subtle yet deep, the kind that wove through the roots of the earth and could not be summoned by mere mortals. As the whisper passed over the glen, the daisy trembled, her silvery petals shivering as though touched by a hand unseen. She did not yet know what the whisper meant, only that it stirred something deep within her, something that had lain dormant all this time. She had felt the weight of her solitude and purpose, yet she had never understood why she bloomed only when the world was cloaked in shadow. She had always felt that the darkness for her held a promise that had yet to be fulfilled. Suddenly, as the sky darkened to a deep, inky blue, the whisper ceased, and silence fell upon the glen, so thick and heavy that even the wind dared not disturb it. It was then that the daisy sensed it, a presence, unseen yet undeniable, as if the very air around her had taken on the weight of magic. And then, from the heart of the silence, a soft, ethereal glow appeared. A figure emerged, delicate and pale, her form slender as a birch tree, and her wings glimmering like mist over a moonlit lake. She wore a gown woven from threads of starlight, each fold shimmering with an otherworldly glow. Her eyes, dark as the depths of midnight, held a wisdom beyond human reckoning. This was the fairy of forgotten paths, the keeper of hidden secrets, and the guardian of those who dwelled in shadow. The daisy, though small and humble, felt a surge of awe. She could not bow her head in reverence, for she had no arms or legs. She was only a flower, yet she tried to make herself as small as possible, as if to show her respect. But the fairy did not look upon her with disdain. Instead, she knelt beside the tiny flower, reaching out a slender hand to touch the delicate petals. "Why do you hide from the sun, little one?" the fairy asked, her voice a soft murmur that seemed to echo through the very roots of the forest. The daisy's voice, though inaudible to others, was a quiet, tremulous thing, like the first stirrings of a breeze before dawn. "I do not seek the day's light," she replied. "I wait, for I feel I am meant for something in the dark." The fairy's lips curved into a faint smile, one touched with the knowing that comes only with the wisdom of eons. "And so you are," she whispered, "for not all light is meant to shine in the day. Some, like you, are born to bring comfort to those lost in the shadows." With a gesture as gentle as falling leaves, the fairy brushed her fingers across the daisy's petals. A spark of light flared where she touched, a glow that sank deep into the flower's heart, filling her with warmth and purpose. The daisy felt her roots dig deeper into the earth, her petals turning more luminous, a quiet light blooming within her core. "From tonight onward, you shall be the light of the lost," the fairy said, her voice soft but resonant, echoing through the forest. "In you, those who wander will find their way." And with those words, the fairy vanished, leaving only the daisy in the silent glen, now filled with a radiance that seemed to pulse in harmony with the night itself. The night had come alive. As darkness folded deeper around the forest, the little daisy found herself bathed in a new, mysterious glow. The gift the fairy had left in her heart pulsed softly, a rhythm that matched the distant shimmer of the stars. She felt as if she were no longer just a flower rooted to the earth, but something larger, a part of the night itself, woven into the fabric of its quiet mysteries. Above, the stars stretched across the sky like scattered embers, each one a silent witness to the daisy's transformation. And then, as if summoned by her newfound light, a single star shot across the heavens, blazing a trail of pure silver before vanishing into the black. For a brief moment, the sky seemed to hold its breath, caught in the star's radiant wake. In that instant, the daisy felt a surge of wonder and purpose. She could sense deep within her the faint cries of those lost in the night, of creatures wandering without direction, and of weary travelers yearning for home. It was as if the fairy's magic had opened a door within her heart, one that connected her to the silent hopes of the world around her. Unbeknownst to her, far beyond the glen, a young fox had lost its way among the tangled roots and shadows. It had strayed too far from its den, lured by a scent that had long since vanished, leaving it alone and frightened beneath the vast, unfamiliar night. As the fox searched, its tiny paws brushed against dead leaves, and its nose twitched at the dark sense of hidden things. Then, faint but certain, it caught sight of the daisy's glow in the distance, a soft, silvery light that beckoned like a promise. Curious and cautious, the fox began to follow the glow, its heart steadied by the thought of a guiding light in a world of shadow. The daisy sensed the fox's approach, felt the timid hope in its heart. And though she could not move or speak, her light grew warmer, casting a gentle path through the darkness, guiding the little creature step by step until it could finally see its way home. The fox paused at the edge of the glen, blinking at the daisy, as though to offer silent thanks before slipping away into the night, its spirit calmed. But the daisy's work was far from over. As the hours wore on, others came, a weary owl with a broken wing, who took shelter in the soft glow, allowing the daisy's light to soothe its pain. A pair of rabbits, who found comfort in the radiance as they huddled against the chill of the night. And even an old stag with a scarred muzzle, who stood at the edge of the glen for a moment, his proud antlers glinting in the daisy's glow, as if recognizing a kindred spirit in the flower's quiet resilience. With each creature that came and left, the daisy felt her heart grow brighter, her petals shimmering with a power she had never known. She realized that the fairy's gift was not just a light to pierce the darkness, but a light of comfort, one that drew the lonely, the lost, and the weary toward hope. Then, as dawn began to edge the sky with the first hints of color, the daisy felt her light fade, shrinking back into her heart like a memory woven into her roots. She knew that her purpose had only just begun, that each night would bring new wanderers, new souls seeking the solace of her glow. As the first rays of sunlight crept into the glen, the daisy bowed her head, retreating into her solitude until night returned. She understood now why she was drawn to the darkness, why she had felt different from the sunlit flowers who danced under the open sky. Her light was meant for those who roamed in shadow, who searched for hope under the stars. And though the fairy had left, her presence lingered in every beam of starlight, in every whisper of wind that brushed against the daisy's petals. She had gifted the daisy more than magic. She had given her a purpose, a way to bloom not in defiance of the night, but in harmony with it. As the forest awoke, the daisy's radiance faded, but a sense of fulfillment remained. She knew, with the certainty of stars woven into her very soul, that she would be there every night, waiting to be the light that the lost could find. She had become the night daisy, a quiet marvel, a hidden beacon, a secret that only those who wandered the dark would ever know. And as she waited for twilight to fall once more, she felt the whisper of the fairy in the soft rustling of leaves, a promise that her light, born of darkness, would always have a place in the world. The next night came, wrapped in a silence so profound it seemed to echo with the memories of all things forgotten. The forest breathed in the stillness, holding its secrets close, and in the heart of that darkness, the night daisy bloomed once again. But tonight was different. As the daisy unfurled her petals, a light rippled from her core, brighter and purer than before. It was as though the forest itself had woven its mysteries into her glow, a radiance that seemed to reach into every shadow, every hidden corner. Her silvery petals shone with a soft brilliance that glinted off leaves, casting faint, dancing patterns on the ground like a tapestry stitched from moonlight. Creatures of the night took notice, each one drawn by the daisy's gentle glow. The glow was not harsh, not piercing like the glare of a torch, but soft and soothing, a light that whispered promises of calm and hope. Moths with wings like folded paper fluttered from the shadows, their delicate bodies outlined against the daisy's glow as they circled her, hypnotized by the gentle warmth. Owls, their feathers streaked with the colors of dusk, sat in quiet vigil on nearby branches, their wide eyes catching the light as they watched in quiet wonder. But the daisy was unaware of her audience, lost in the magic that filled her heart. She felt a part of something vast and timeless, as if the fairy's gift had tied her to an ancient current running through the earth and stars. She understood in some inexplicable way that her light was not merely her own. It belonged to the lost and wandering, to those seeking guidance in the dark. And so, with each pulse of her radiance, she poured her heart into the forest, her glow spreading in waves of quiet comfort. Then, from the shadows beyond the glen, the first of the night's wanderers appeared, a young girl, clothed in the tattered remnants of a cloak that had once been fine, now frayed and worn by long travels. Her face was streaked with the weariness of the road, her eyes hollow with the weight of countless lost hours. The girl stumbled into the daisy's glen, her steps faltering as the light touched her face. She stopped, blinking, as though the brightness were a dream, a trick of the night. But the daisy held her light steady, bathing the girl in a gentle warmth that softened the edges of her fear. Slowly, as though drawn by an unseen force, the girl approached, her hands reaching out to the soft glow. For the first time, the daisy felt a strange sensation, a tenderness, a wish to protect and soothe. And in that moment, her light grew warmer, spreading across the glen like a soft silver dawn. The girl knelt beside the daisy, her face lit with an expression of wonder. With trembling hands, she held her fingers to the light, allowing its warmth to seep into her tired skin, filling her with a sense of peace that melted away her weariness. The daisy could feel the gratitude in the girl's heart, the relief that poured through her like rain soaking into thirsty soil. And as she knelt there, the girl whispered a quiet thanks, words that the daisy could not understand, yet felt deeply within her petals. This was why she bloomed, why she waited patiently through the long hours of the day, hidden and unseen. For this, the chance to be a balm to those who sought her light. And when the girl finally rose to leave, her footsteps no longer faltered. She carried a part of the daisy's light with her, her heart renewed, her spirit lighter. She vanished into the trees, the faint glow of the daisy reflected in her eyes as she went, her path illuminated by a hope she hadn't known she was missing. But she was not the last to find comfort that night. As the hours deepened, others came, some lost in body, some lost in spirit. A wounded wolf limped into the glen, its dark fur gleaming silver as it rested by the daisy's side, lulled into a quiet sleep by the warmth that wrapped around it. An old raven perched in the branches above, its wings heavy with age and distance, basking in the soft glow as though it were a memory of the sun it had long ago forgotten. And in each visitor, the daisy felt a connection, a silent exchange of solace and peace. With each heartbeat, her light grew a little stronger, as though every soul she touched added to the well of magic within her. The forest, once dark and foreboding, felt alive and welcoming, transformed by the quiet radiance that pulsed from her heart. As dawn crept closer, the daisy's glow began to fade once more, retreating like a tide drawn back into her petals. But she felt no sadness as the darkness returned, for she knew now that her purpose was fulfilled with every night. She was a quiet marvel, a beacon of hope, blooming only in the darkest hours, waiting to guide those who sought her light. And as the first rays of sunlight touched the forest, the night daisy lowered her head, closing her petals against the day, resting until the stars once more called her to bloom. The nights passed in an endless dance of shadows and light. Each evening, the daisy unfurled her petals, her soft glow spilling across the forest floor like moonlight woven through dew. Animals and travelers alike came to her glen, each seeking refuge, each finding comfort in her silvery warmth. The daisy was no longer merely a flower. She had become a beacon, a quiet guardian for those who dared tread the forest's hidden paths. Yet, as her light grew brighter and her purpose stronger, so too did the shadows deepen. Strange forms began to linger at the edge of her glen, creatures wrapped in darkness, their shapes indistinct, yet their intentions unmistakable. These were the shadows, spirits of forgotten sorrows and buried regrets, drawn to her light like moths to a flame, yet carrying with them a hunger that could not be soothed. On a night when the stars lay scattered like shattered glass across the sky, the shadows drew closer than ever before. They gathered silently, blending into the darkness, their figures flickering and shifting, their edges frayed as though they were made of smoke and memory. The daisy sensed them, felt their cold hunger, and for the first time her light flickered, a tremor running through her petals like a chill of fear. The shadows crept closer, their presence pressing against her light, testing its strength. The creatures of the night who had come to rest in her glen began to retreat, sensing the weight of this encroaching darkness. The daisy felt the forest hold its breath, every tree, every leaf poised in anticipation, as though the very land awaited her next move. In that moment of fear, the daisy remembered the fairy's words, "You shall be the light of the lost." The words echoed within her, a spark of courage igniting in her heart. She realized that her light was not merely for those who sought her comfort. It was also a shield against the dark, a flame that could stand against even the shadow's hungry grasp. The daisy lifted her head, her petals trembling but resolute. She poured her heart into her glow, her light swelling outward in a wave of silver warmth that rippled through the forest, touching every branch, every root, every hidden corner. The shadows paused, recoiling slightly, as though burned by the intensity of her radiance. But they did not vanish. Instead, they began to whisper, their voices thin and hollow, like wind through a graveyard of forgotten dreams. "Why do you resist, little flower?" they hissed, their voices weaving around her, laced with temptation. "You are but a flicker in the night, a brief bloom. Come to us and we will give you the strength to shine forever." The daisy's heart wavered. She could feel the shadow's words curl around her, a dark seduction that tugged at her petals, promising an eternity of light without the fear of fading, a power boundless and eternal. But as the whispers pressed closer, she sensed a hollowness within them, a cold, empty hunger that chilled her very roots. She gathered her courage, drawing on the memory of each creature that had found solace in her glow, every traveler whose path she had illuminated. Her light was not hers alone. It belonged to the forest, to those who needed it. She understood then that her gift was not in burning endlessly, but in blooming despite the darkness, in shining her brightest, even if only for a fleeting moment. With a final surge, the daisy flared brighter than ever, her petals blazing with a light that cut through the night like a sword of starlight. The shadows recoiled, shrinking back into the edges of the glen, their forms wavering and flickering, unable to bear the force of her radiance. One by one, they faded, slipping back into the depths of the forest, leaving only a heavy silence in their wake. As the daisy's light softened once more, the creatures of the forest began to return, their spirits renewed by the strength she had shown. The owl perched on a nearby branch, its golden eyes glimmering with quiet respect. The fox padded back into the glen, curling up near the daisy's roots, its breathing calm and steady. In the quiet that followed, the daisy felt a profound sense of peace, as though she had truly become a part of the night, a guardian and a guide, holding darkness at bay, not with force, but with quiet, steadfast courage. She realized now that her power lay not in the promise of forever, but in her willingness to stand against the shadows, to bloom in defiance of the dark, and to be a beacon, even if only for those who sought her. As dawn began to touch the edges of the sky, she felt her light fade, retreating once again into the depths of her heart. But she knew now, with a certainty woven from the stars and shadows, that she would return each night, unyielding, her light undiminished by the darkness around her. And as the sun rose, the daisy lowered her head, her petals folding inward, resting until twilight once more called her to bloom. She was the night daisy, a keeper of hope, and she would be there every night, waiting to be the light that held the shadows at bay. With each night, the night daisy's light grew deeper, more resilient, and the forest seemed to settle around her presence, as though acknowledging a new guardian among its ancient roots. Creatures of the night no longer stumbled upon her glen by accident, but arrived with the quiet assurance that she would be there, waiting like a silent star to guide them. One particular night, the forest was shrouded in an unusually thick mist, a grey veil that curled around trees and lay heavy on the ground, muffling even the softest sounds. The glen was almost hidden, the mist cloaking the trees, winding around their trunks like forgotten memories. Yet through the fog, the daisy's light shone, a steady, luminous glow that seemed to make the mist itself shimmer with hints of silver. In the distance, faint footsteps sounded, a slow, stumbling rhythm, as though the one walking had grown tired of every step. Through the mist came an old man, his face lined with the years, and his shoulders bent with the weight of long travels. His eyes were downcast, his gaze unfocused, and he seemed unaware of where he was or why he had come. The forest around him was unfamiliar, each shadow an echo of things long past, each breath a weary sigh. He was lost not only in the woods but within himself, carrying the heaviness of a heart burdened by unfulfilled dreams and abandoned hopes. Yet, as he trudged forward, his gaze was caught by a soft glow weaving through the mist, a light so gentle that it felt like a whisper, a beckoning he couldn't resist. He lifted his eyes and saw the night daisy, her petals open and glowing, casting a serene radiance across the glen that pierced the fog with its quiet warmth. Drawn by her light, the old man made his way forward, his steps slow and hesitant, as though he were uncertain if such a light could truly be meant for him. He reached the edge of the glen and stopped, his hand resting on a gnarled tree trunk. His breath caught in his throat as he took in the sight before him. In that one luminous flower, he felt the promise of something he had long forgotten, a memory of hope, of a dream that had once burned brightly within him. The daisy felt his sorrow, sensed the weight of his burdens, and in that moment, her light grew warmer, a pulse of empathy that reached out to touch his weary heart. She could not speak, but she poured all her gentle radiance into her glow, offering him the comfort of her presence, the silent assurance that even in the heart of darkness, he was not alone. The man stepped closer, his eyes filled with a softness that had been absent for many years. He knelt beside her, lowering himself to her level, and he reached out a trembling hand, his fingers brushing against her petals. He could feel the warmth, a quiet strength that seeped into his skin, filling him with a sense of peace he had not known in a long, long time. For the first time in years, a small smile crept across his lips, and a tear traced down his cheek, catching the daisy's light and turning it into a sparkling bead. He whispered to her, his voice barely audible, "Thank you." Though she was only a flower, he spoke to her as though she were an old friend, as though she alone could understand the depths of his soul. As he knelt there, the mist around the glen began to lift, thinning until the stars above could be seen, tiny pinpricks of light dotting the vast, endless sky. The daisy's glow mingled with the starlight, creating a soft, shimmering cocoon that surrounded them both, a world woven from silver threads of hope and healing. Slowly, the man rose, his steps steady now, his heart lighter. He left the glen with one last glance at the night daisy, her glow a memory he would carry with him for the rest of his days. And as he disappeared into the forest, the daisy sensed the shift in his heart, the small spark of hope that had been rekindled within him. She knew that her light had been more than a beacon. It had become a part of him, a quiet promise that would guide him long after he left her presence. Throughout the night, others came, a young fawn separated from its mother, a girl clutching a bundle of wildflowers lost in her own reverie, and a nightingale with a broken wing resting in the glow until dawn. Each one left with a piece of her light in their hearts, a reminder that there was always a way through the darkness, no matter how lost they felt. And as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, the night daisy folded her petals, retreating once more into herself, her glow fading like the last star of morning. But her heart was full, for she knew that her purpose was bound to the night, that she would bloom again with the coming dusk, waiting patiently for those who needed her light. Thus, the night daisy continued to bloom, her light a silent gift for all who wandered. In the heart of the dark woods, under the watchful eyes of the stars, she stood as a beacon, a blossom of hope that would never fade. And in her glow, countless souls would find their way, reminded by her quiet resilience that even the smallest light could banish the deepest shadows.